In today's video, we're going to begin our lesson in 1 Samuel, beginning in chapter 1, where we learn about the final judge, the prophet Samuel. Okay, before we begin chapter 1 of 1 Samuel, we actually have to travel back a little bit to Judges to start to understand some parallels because the author of 1 Samuel is drawing some lines between an older judge and this last judge that God is about to raise up. In Judges chapter 13, verse 2, we read, "There was a certain man of Zorah, the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children." This man, Manoah, is the father of Samson, one of the greatest judges. But one thing we know about Samson is Samson did just as all the other judges did. He always did what was right in his own eyes. However, listen to the opening of 1 Samuel chapter 1. There was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim, also known as Ramah, of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah. Now, both Elkanah and Manoah were godly men. Their sons are going to grow up to be judges. But from birth, actually before birth, they were declared to be Nazarites, and they had taken the Nazarite vow. They fought the Philistines fiercely. And there's so many parallels between the two that you have to pay particular attention to it to understand where Israel was and where Israel is going. Let's continue. Now, looking at the latter part of verse 1, we begin to learn something very important about this man, Elkanah, through his genealogy. Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. If you turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 6, verses 33 through 35, we see the same exact genealogy, which tells us that Elkanah is from the Kohathite branch of the tribe of Levi, which meant that he was a Levite. He had a very important duty. And now this will play into the dedication of his son that will be made by his wife, Hanna. But I don't want to spoil it. We got to get there first. Verse 2. He had two wives. The name of one was Hanna, and the name of the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hanna had no children. First and foremost, you have to understand that nowhere in the Bible is polygamy ever approved of. Now, it might be said that it was allowed in Deuteronomy, but if you turn to Mark, the way that Jesus describes polygamy to some of the Pharisees who were trying to corner him on the law is that Moses allowed this because of their hardened hearts, but it was never a part of God's design. We were designed to be one man, one woman, joined together as one flesh. But Elkanah, even though he's a Levite, and even though he is somewhat of a godly man, still falls into the same realm as everybody else did during this time. He did what was right in his own eyes. Furthermore, we're about to learn a reason that Elkanah had taken on two wives. We probably want to assume that Hanna was his first wife. It's the one that he truly loved, but she was barren. She was unable to have children. And Peninnah came along and she was able to have children. And so he solved that problem by making a decision that other people similar to him have made before him by trying to solve it himself and not through God. Think back to Abraham. What did Abraham do when God made a promise for him and Sarah? Is that he tried to fulfill that promise, but he didn't have faith in God originally to do that. And so he took on Sarah's maiden, Hagar, and they tried to have their own son together, which brought Ishmael and then a litany of problems for this world after that. We see Elkanah making the same decision here. He's not relying on God. He's not praying to God. He's trying to solve his problems in order to carry on his namesake in his own way. And that's by taking on two wives. And this causes great problems for Hanna. Verse 3. Now this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. Now, if we're not careful to understand what's going on here, the climate, who Hophni, Phinehas, and Eli are, we might skip and miss how important and how extra special this is what Elkanah is doing. Yes, he's a Levi, and it's more expected of him to be able to do these things. But also understand that we are straight out of the book of Judges. In the earlier Hebrew manuscripts, we don't even have that nice book of Ruth, which gives us a little bit of hope, a little bit of encouragement before we step into Samuel. In those early manuscripts, it goes straight from Judges of all this moral decay right into Samuel, continuing the moral decay. And we're going to learn that moral decay exists explicitly here in these three priests. Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas. And I don't want to breach chapter 2 too much, but I would like you to turn there and just turn to chapter 2, verse 12, and take a look at that very first two sentences. It says, "Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord." These were priests, these were pastors who were leading the church, and we're going to learn some awful things about these men and what they've done and what they continue to do. But the fact that they are so corrupt and they are misleading their church, but yet here's this man, Elkanah, taking his family year after year after year to the temple to sacrifice to the Lord. Not only was that something that was unheard of in this time of moral decay, but that was definitely something that was unheard of in a place that was run under such corrupt leadership. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hanna he gave double portion, because he loved her, though the Lord closed her womb. And her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. Now, we're learning a few things here, and something that might even be shocking to some people. One, Elkanah, as he's sacrificing, he's giving portions to his family, to his children, to Peninnah, but he gives double portions to his first wife, the one he loves the most. And it's as if that's going to make up for what has happened to her. And it wasn't by chance, it wasn't by some unfortunate accident. This was a sovereign act, the sovereign will of the Lord to close the womb of Hanna. And for what reason, we don't know. We don't know why God would do that, but we do know that he did do it. And here's something that is a principle that all of us need to understand, that no matter what, whatever God has done, he gives us good gifts, but he also gives us limitations. And whether it's a gift or a limitation that is in our life, God has done that for his sovereign will, his glorification, the advancement of his kingdom. And so we learn here that God had closed her womb. And what that meant to a woman like that was that it almost appeared that she was cursed. That this was done by God because of something that she or maybe her parents or someone down her lineage had done wrong. And now she was reaping the curse because of it. And furthermore, her rival would provoke her. Peninnah she was a mean woman, an evil woman. And we have to ask ourselves, it will make you beg the question, why is that? Why would God allow such a mean, evil, hateful woman to have children? She practically has her own little baseball team here. But Hanna, this loving woman, this godly woman, can have none. It makes you think about modern day times when you have all these people who are able to have children and they get pregnant and they quickly wake up in the morning so that they can go to a clinic and get rid of the baby. But then you have God-fearing, loving couples that are out there who try year after year after year, seeking medical attention across the entire country, spending who knows how much money in order to try to have children. But it's not God's will. And that's the thing, is that we have to remain in peace. And what Hannah is going to show us is that no matter what comes against us, no matter who comes against us, we have to remain peaceful in understanding that it is God who's sovereign and not us. He has a plan for our lives. Man makes plans, but God directs his steps. And God is directing Hannah to something more beautiful than what she could ever imagine. All right, continuing in verse 7. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? You see, Peninnah is just relentless in her rivalry, in provoking Hannah, in beating her down and making her feel bad. And it says, and this is the worst part of it, it happens year after year. Year after year, as Elkanah takes his family up to sacrifice to the Lord, there's Peninnah right on the backs of Hannah, making fun of her, calling her names, provoking her. Could you imagine her saying something to the effect of, what have you done? Why are you so evil? Why would God close your womb? Why can't you have children? I can have children. And I bet she would say something to the effect of, Elkanah loves me more than he loves you. And she would say the worst things to her, but nowhere in here do we see Hannah ever snapping back at her, ever rebuking her, ever even rebuking her husband. As a matter of fact, her husband seems to be almost oblivious to this. Hannah's become depressed. She's sad. She refuses to eat. She's heartbroken. And here's her husband who chose her first. And he's asking her, why aren't you eating? What's wrong? What's going on? Am I not good enough? Yeah, I know you want to have kids, but hey, I'm just as good as 10 kids you could possibly ever have. If that's not the most egotistical man thing to say, then I don't know what is. Because that's just like us, is to go and we try to solve the problem by making the problem worse by saying something stupid like that. But here's the deal. Hannah remains at peace. She's heartbroken and she's depressed and she's sad. And so this finally builds up into her to a climactic point where she's going to go into the tabernacle and she's going to pray a beautiful prayer. Let's get there. Verse 9. After they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli, the priest, was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. Now, because they are eating and drinking at Shiloh, we probably can assume that they're at the Feast of Booths, which is somewhere between September and October timeframe. But we know that Hannah is fasting during that time. She should be eating, she should be celebrating, but she just can't. She's sick to her stomach. She's constantly being met with the guilt of her rival who's provoking her day in and day out. And then her husband is just failing completely to provide her any sort of comfort. So Hannah gets up. She goes into the temple. She goes into the tabernacle. And there she begins to pray a very deep prayer. She's deeply distressed. And when she prays this, Lord, she weeps bitterly. And she says, O Lord of hosts. Now, or Lord of hosts is understood as Lord of the armies. She recognizes God as the one who leads the army that will fight for her. Exodus 14:14 tells us that we don't have to fight our own wars. It's God who fights for us. All we have to do is remain calm. And that's what Hannah is desperately trying to do in the face of all this evil that confronts her. What makes Hannah's prayer so special is that she's not praying to God just to give me a child, let me have a child so I can show Peninnah that I'm not barren, so that I can please my husband Elkanah, so that I can seem normal throughout society. She's asking God to give her a child so that she can dedicate it to Him. She's asking Him to do this service so that she can glorify Him. And not only that, she's not just dedicating her child by giving him to the service of the tabernacle, which she can do, by the way, because if you remember, they're from a family of Levites. but she's doing it in a way that she's declaring it a Nazarite vow. Now, Hannah is a married woman making a vow, which, according to Numbers chapter 30, verses 6 through 15, it could be confirmed or nullified by the husband. But this vow, nonetheless, is very significant. And even though it doesn't say it's explicitly a Nazarite vow, we can assume it is such because she says no razor will ever touch his head. According to Numbers chapter 6, the Nazarite vow, there are several rules, and one of those is no razor can touch the head. They can't drink anything with grapes in it, especially wine or grape juice, no vinegar, and they can't touch a dead body. But significantly, the Nazarite vow only lasted for a certain period of time for most men and women. But for someone like Samuel, it was going to last his entire lifetime. Verse 12. As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, How long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, No, my lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your eyes. Then the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. So here we are. Hannah cannot get a break. She goes into the tabernacle to pray this deep prayer, and she's saying it silently. Now, we know through Romans chapter 8, verses 26 through 27, that the Holy Spirit will intercede for us. He knows our deepest prayers and sends them up to God on our behalf. And so have confidence that when you close your eyes, and you pray silently, that God hears every word. He hears words that you even intended to say. But traditionally, in this text, people used to pray out loud in the tabernacle. And here Eli sees this woman with her mouth just moving. Eli is the leader of the temple. He's supposed to be there to guide the people and to give them hope and help them. He's supposed to have discernment, but he lacks that ability. He's a lame leader. Hannah can't find support in her husband. She can't find support in her husband's other wife. And now she can't find support in the leaders of the temple. Who is she to find support in? And it's God only. And that's only who she trusts. At this point, she has every right to point her finger back at Eli and to tell him what's happening, to say, You don't know what I've been through. You have no idea what's going on. And it's probably a reaction that any of us would have done at that time. But Hannah is humble and her heart is broken. And she simply says, No, my Lord, I'm not drunk. I have not drank strong drink. She says that I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. And in that moment, Eli, in just for a brief second, comes to fulfill his priestly duties. And he tells her to go in peace and that the God of Israel will grant her petition. And that bit of prophecy is eventually fulfilled. And finally, Hannah walks out of that tabernacle with a smile on her face. It says, The woman went away, she ate, she broke her fast, and her face was no longer sad. And that's the way it should be for all of us when we leave church. When we're at church, especially in times of tribulation and trouble, when we're having problems, when we walk out of there, our heart should be poured out inside the church so that when we leave, we feel not the weight of the problems that surround us, but we feel that it's been lifted off of our shoulders because we know that it's now in the hands of God who will fight for us and who will answer our petitions according to his will. Verse 19. They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time Hannah conceived and bore a son. And she called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. And there it is. Just as God had sovereignly closed her womb, he opened it for Hannah. And Hannah rejoiced. And she named her son Samuel, which literally means name of God, but it sounds like heard by God, which for Hannah was most important because she felt that she was definitely heard by God through her silent prayer. All right, let's finish the chapter out. Verse 21. The man Elkanah and his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and to pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, As soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him, so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine. And she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. And the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull, and they brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as you live, my word, I am the woman who was standing here in your presence, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. We're wrapping up chapter 1 here the same way that we started chapter 1 with Elkanah visiting the temple again, or the tabernacle again, and making his yearly sacrifice. But this time it's a little bit different because he's bringing his votive offering as it's prescribed in Leviticus 7:16. This is where he's showing that he supports Hannah in her silent vow to put their kid in the family business. Now, Hannah is staying back this time because she's taking that opportunity to wean her child. As was customary, a child would be weaned off probably around the ages of 2, 3, 4 at the latest. So, at best, we could expect that Samuel was showing up to the tabernacle to serve for the rest of his life at the age of 4. Now, as Hannah shows up, she's also bringing her offering, which is according to Numbers chapter 15, and that's verses 8 through 10. And it shows that she's not just bringing what she's supposed to bring, she's bringing more than that amount. And furthermore, she's not just bringing a bull, she's not just bringing a flower, she's not just bringing drink, she's bringing her son. She's bringing the gift that God gave her, and she's laying it at the steps of the tabernacle, and she's sacrificing that because it is for the glorification of God and the advancement of his kingdom. So there it is. That's 1 Samuel chapter 1. It's a story that tells us about a woman who is a great example for us all. That no matter what's against us, no matter what trouble or tribulation comes in our lives, no matter who's mean to us or what problems we might have, nothing is too great for our God. All we have to do is close our eyes, remain silent, breathe oxygen, and let God go to work for you in his life. I hope that this lesson has blessed you, and I look forward to doing many more.